Hello, my name is Ruth Vere and I'm here today to present to you about why educating communities is only half the battle. As animal welfareists, we spend much of our lives focusing on animal behaviour, but we spend very little time focusing on human behaviour and how it materialises. And it's more interesting than you thought. This is a phrase I've come across many times in my life. Once we educate, people will change their behaviour. But knowing something doesn't make it happen. Most of us reach adulthood with a good sense of what choices make for a long and healthy life, and many of us fail to make these choices in reality. What's the benefit of regular exercise? What's a healthier choice, carrots or cake? Is it a good idea to be a smoker? How much alcohol is good for us? We know the answers to these questions, in theory, but they don't always happen, or we don't make these decisions consistently well, not always have our own best interests at heart. So why not? And this is where it's really important to understand how we think. When solving a problem or writing a thesis, then we ponder, we evaluate. If we're comparing mortgage deals, we've really got to sit down, we've got to concentrate, we've got to stop doing other things. We've got to really think and weigh up, what do we know, what research do we need, what data are we missing? And this is a really well thought out process. But if the decision is about what to have for lunch, how much to donate to a charity, or what goes into our shopping cart, and other various decisions that we make throughout the day, we use a different process because we can't possibly use the same amount of energy that we've invested in those first kind of conversations, those first kind of decisions, as we do for the others that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis. And this basically has led to a description of two different brain pathways, two different brain approaches, systems within the brain. These aren't actual functioning parts of the brain that you could identify, but these are two pathways that exist. And these two systems are referred to as System 1 and System 2, and the brain relies on them to make these different kinds of decisions. And you won't like what you're about to hear. Humans are predictably irrational. So we rely on our System 1 to make intuitive decisions. It's instinctive. It searches automatically all of your memory banks, all of the thoughts and processes and beliefs and values that you have set in stone that make who you are. It does this instantaneously. It's rapid. It's completely subconscious. You don't know it's happening, but it comes up with a rapid suggestion that it will make to System 2. System 2, sadly, is very lazy. This is the rational, on-demand, very slow part of the brain that really weighs up all the knowledge that you have, all the pros and cons of a particular decision, and this is the really weighty sit down and think part of the brain. And if the suggestions from System 1 seem to be fairly good, there's nothing about them that cause System 2 to raise an eyebrow, if you like, or to be concerned, or there's nothing that indicates that this is a lie, then the suggestions from System 1 will be accepted because System 2 really doesn't want to be engaged if it doesn't have to. If we're engaging our System 2 brain, this is really costly to us. It takes a lot of energy and makes us vulnerable because we're out of action while we're thinking through this very difficult problem. And so its default is to rely on what System 1 tells us. And what that means is there's a massive balance in how we make decisions. 98% of our decisions are made using System 1. Intuitive, instinctive, fast, go with the flow. Only 2% of our decisions are based on this weighed up, pros versus cons, education-based, knowledge-based, skills-based, really deep-seated thinking. And that's why educating is only half of the battle, because education is persuasion and persuasion is System 2. Many things in life, from the field of economics to government policy, right the way through to how things are designed for our use, have been designed with econs at the heart of them. These are smart, rational beings. They're self-interested, they're well thought out. These are System 2 thinkers. The problem is that there's no one that fits that description, because humans, by their very nature, are biased, irrational, social, and lazy. We want to take the line of least resistance. There are two principles I want to introduce you to in the remainder of this presentation. They're both really huge fields and you would benefit from exploring them further in your own time. I'm only able to tackle them both in a really surface level in this presentation, but collectively they can transform how you go about achieving your goals. The first of these is social marketing, and it's not to be confused with social media. Social marketing is where we use all the great skills from marketing, but we use it for social good, rather than from those great big corporate enterprises that apply their marketing machine to sell stuff to us. This is where we get to use those same skills for the benefit of the society around us. The really important thing to do is to understand how they apply it. Big companies don't launch new products based on assumptions. For them, data is power. They talk to their audience. They spend a huge amount of time and money investing in gathering data on their audience so that they really understand them. And the alarming thing is they understand us better than we understand ourselves in many situations. But having understood and having gathered all that data on us, they invest in promoting or advertising their products or services in places where they know we'll see them, in places where they know we are. And they also use language that responds to the irrational need, not the logical reason. Think about the adverts that you see on television or anywhere, for example. They sell you a lifestyle, they sell you an aspiration. They don't sell you the logical and well spelt out reasons as to why this product will be beneficial to you. Think of some of the actions or behaviours that you'd like from your target audience or the communities you work in to take. Your list will be specific to you. These are just some basic descriptors of ideal pet ownership behaviours. You might choose something different. Once you've got these actions defined in your mind, you then need to sit and explore them a little bit more. Are these actions sort of umbrella terms and can actually be broken down further into smaller, non-divisible behaviours? Or are they that very niche, singular action that you can't break down any further? And it's important to do that because if you do break down a behaviour into separate smaller actions, then you might find that there are barriers at each step of the way. You need to understand why any one of those individual and separate divisible behaviours can be a blocker to why the overarching behaviour is not being seen. So, for example, on the previous slide, I had getting a new dog vaccinated as a sample behaviour. Sounds like a single action, but in terms of why it doesn't happen, there could be all sorts of reasons if you break it down into the smaller actions. Could be that if it's a new pet, they haven't found a local vet yet. They haven't registered yet. Once they have, they've got to book an appointment. They've got to take the dog in. For example, if it's a dog, is it on a carrier? Is it on a lead? Is it in the car, public transport? Do I know the way? Can I afford to pay the fee? So there's lots of smaller behaviours and lots of smaller barriers potentially that can stop that behaviour from happening. So simply producing a leaflet that says you should vaccinate your pet isn't going to result in the behaviour change if their reason for not doing it is because they haven't registered with a vet yet and they don't know where their local vets are. So once you've got your non-divisible behaviours and you're clear about the things you want to ask, the next thing you need to do is undertake market research, which might sound quite scary, but it's literally the fancy phrase to describe getting to know your audience. How do you do it? Well, there's a number of ways, and the most obvious way is the really costly way, where you commission an agency to do it. Lots of agencies out there, you pay a fee and they'll undertake the research for you. They'll do the analysis and they'll provide you with some insights and some actions you should take. But if you haven't got the budget to cover that kind of piece of research, you can do it for free. The really important thing to do is to understand the principles behind the market research. The first thing is that you need to understand some qualitative data. So you'd undertake a focus group. And this is literally where you get a handful of people around a table, you keep them for about 2 hours and you ask them about 7 or 8 questions. And the really important principle here, if you're running the focus group, and it is ideal if you could get a completely independent person to do it, but if it's you, your job is to ask the question and to listen, not to defend, not to answer, and not to explain. You simply want to find out and listen to their perspectives. But having understood some of their barriers and some of their perspectives, you can then put some of that into some survey questions. And this is where the quantitative data comes into best practice. You can put polls on your website, you can send surveys out to your mailing list if you have one, you can include them in newsletters or put quick, short, sharp polls through SMS messaging, some way that you can put a question out to the masses if you have access to them. You can even add some standard questions to your customer service process if you have one, for example. But what kind of things are you asking? Well, you're asking about their perceptions, about the behaviours, why they don't happen, what they believe the case to be, and what they believe the barriers are to them taking that action. Ask them what stops them behaving in that way, what barriers are in their way, because if it was easy, they would be doing it. Ask them what support they need to help remove the barriers, because then that can guide you in your work. And this then leads me on to the second principle I want to share today, and this is behavioural economics. And this is where you use all the learnings, all the behavioural insights you gather through your market research, and then begin to apply some really interesting tactics to leverage some behaviour change that doesn't necessarily rely on you educating. So it's important to recognise that our behaviours are motivated by really powerful things that might be completely unrelated to the behaviour itself. And sometimes that can be quite alarming and distressing to see, and sometimes we don't believe it, but evidence shows that it's true. Once you know the barriers to the action that you want and the things that motivate and drive your audience, you can trigger behaviour change. And some examples of the tools that I'm about to speak to in the remainder of this presentation speak to the emotional intuitive system 1. And because this is such a massive field, I'm literally giving you a bit of a taster of some of the most interesting and exciting tactics, but there are many, and they can be applied in tandem or in isolation, and some can be more effective than others depending on your audience or the time at which you're using it. But this is just really a taster of some of the tactics that can really result in transformational change. The first and most famous is the nudge, and this behaviour change tactic was made famous by the book Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, and it is literally a prompt, and this is delivered at the point the decision is being made or when the action usually happens. And this is why that market research is really key. You need to understand, when are people thinking about this thing? When are they likely to make a decision or take an action related to the behaviour that you want to see? And then your job is to apply a nudge to remind them or bring what is a subconscious decision back into the conscious at the relevant and right time and in the place where they are. There's no point putting out a double-page spread in the morning newspaper for an action and a behaviour and a decision that's taken at night time. The timing and placement of the prompt is key. You really have to understand when these decisions are being made, and you can get instantaneous results, and there are many, many examples of instantaneous behaviour change. One of the most famous nudges are the flies painted on the urinals at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. And the airport was suffering from rather unclean toilets, a huge amount of spillage, and therefore large cleaning costs. And as a result, they removed the urinals and replaced them with these that had a fly painted and included in the enamel. This is a nudge. There was no instruction, there were no posters, there was no signage to indicate what had happened. There was simply appealing to the innate desire to aim. And this nudge happens right at the point when the action and the behaviour takes place. It resulted in a reduction in spillage by 80% and a reduction in cleaning costs to the airport across its entire airport system of around 8%. There are many, many nudges that encourage us to behave a particular way at a given moment in time, and I strongly recommend that you go and find the book Nudge and have a read for yourself. Something else that's hugely powerful is social norming. We're a social species, and we want to go with the herd. We want to do what is normal, and that is what is everyone else doing. Our System 1 wants to make shortcuts. The first question System 1 wants to know is, what's everyone else doing? And that's why if you go on holiday and you see two restaurants next to each other, one is full, one is empty, you're probably going to go for the full one because that's what everyone else has decided, and that many people can't be wrong. It's far more motivating. All studies demonstrate that doing what everyone else is doing is far more motivating than doing the right thing. And that's really powerful for any of our messaging, whether it's campaign messaging or whatever, is to tie it to the social group. How many people are doing what we want, rather than all of the educated reasons as to why they should be doing it. If we educate more, it doesn't result in the behaviour change. If we tell them that 70% of their peers are doing it, they'll do it. So it's really important that if you are going to say 70% of your peers are doing it, that needs to be grounded in evidence. You need to do your market research to make sure you have that data. You can't use that if it's incorrect, because you'll soon be found out and then people won't trust you. But if you do have a study of a piece of behaviour that you wish to change, and you know that more than 50% are doing it, you can absolutely perfectly within your right say the majority of people are doing this. The majority of people like you behave in this way, and that is hugely powerful. And this has been demonstrated with some really lovely energy consumption pieces of research. So when you design for econs and rational thinking, you might see a poster like this one. Lights consume energy. When not in use, switch them off. Save energy, save money. Really good reasons. And we can sit here in the cold light of day and say, absolutely, let's conserve energy. I want to save energy, save the planet, and I'd like to save money. Absolutely. Does it work? No. Nobody reduces their energy consumption based on that poster. But when you design for humans and you send them an energy bill, which tells them their energy consumption in relation to their neighbours, and you can tell them that you are using 8% more electricity than your neighbours, this has been proven to reduce energy consumption and to keep it low over time. Another really powerful tactic that's really worth investigating and exploring more is choice architecture. And this is literally how something is laid out. It could be the physical space that's laid out, like a cafeteria, or it could be how a process or a system is laid out in order to help us make a decision. And one really great example of a process or a system is organ donation. Now, this is a study done by Johnson and Goldstein in 2003 and shows a marked difference in some countries in Europe compared to other countries based on how many donors consent to organ donation. The difference between those countries with nigh on 100% donor consent rates, those in the blue, and those in the gold, with lucky if you can get 30% in the Netherlands, is whether or not, in order to be a donor, whether you opt in or whether you opt out. In the blue countries, it's opt out. It is assumed that you consent unless you do something about it and opt out. There's no judgment, there's no problem. You just have to be bothered to go in and opt out. And in places like Sweden, you have more opt out than anywhere else, for example. But on the whole, most people aren't that bothered either way, and they therefore can't be bothered to go through the motions of opting out, and so they don't. The opposite is true in the countries with the gold bars. This is where you have to opt in. And it's the barrier is the friction cost of people not being bothered to go and do the thing. They don't want to go online, they don't want to fill in the form. It's got nothing to do with whether or not they have a problem with being donors. So the choice architecture here is driving decisions. And these defaults are really important. And we're beginning to see more defaults across things like pensions and other policy decisions. And you'll see it all the time with first month is free of any kind of sign up, and then you have to go in and opt out, and that is because most people can't be bothered. So this has been a rather whistle-stop tour of human behaviour change and why it's really important and how it can get you to where you need to go quicker than choosing to educate. The key takeaways really are: the first thing you need to do is understand the behaviours and the actions you need from your audience. But you also need to speak to your audience, understand why it happens or doesn't happen, understand the barriers and the motivations and the assistance they need to make the behaviour easy and social and likely. And then you need to choose some behavioural tactics to try, and there's a wealth of knowledge based in the references at the end of this presentation. Thank you for listening.